Welcome to Preparing for the Unexpected. I'm your host, Alex Fullick, and as always, we like to talk about things related to resilience, crisis management, communications, continuity plans, anything that helps you, your organization, or your community prepare for, respond to, and overcome adverse situations. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, please feel free. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm the only Alex Fullick there. I'm really easy to find, and I do respond to everything I get. Today, we're going to be talking about bridging silos, and I'd like to welcome to the show for his first appearance, Christopher Stitt. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. It's a great opportunity to be here, Alex. I really appreciate your invitation. I've watched some of your episodes and content, and I find the discussions to be, very enlightening. So, thank you very much for the opportunity to contribute.
My pleasure. And even after watching some episodes, you still decided to come on. Good for you.
Indeed.
Now, I know you and I have chatted a little bit. Can you take a moment and tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, and how you got into this industry?
Sure. I am a longtime veteran in this industry. I spent almost 30 years in U.S. federal law enforcement, the last about 27 as a special agent with the U.S. Department of State's Diplomatic Security Service. Through that, the Diplomatic Security Service is the security and law enforcement arm of the U.S. Department of State, carrying out those missions around the world. So, as part of that, I ended up uh, serving in 5 different countries for a total of 11 years. I've also worked in about another 40 countries, in addition to the United States. Various roles in converged security, everything from executive protection and criminal investigations at our field offices, to in the overseas roles doing converged security, i.e., physical security, technical security, executive protection, cybersecurity, insider threat, emergency management, and on and on. Basically, if it has a security or law enforcement bent on it, we were involved as the regional security officers. Um, I also served as the chief of emergency planning for the U.S. Department of State twice. And in that role, I had the opportunity to completely revise the emergency planning handbook that every embassy and consulate in the world uses to develop their localized emergency action plans. Um, Through that job, I also oversaw the development of the first 2 generations of software that the Department of State uses to take that enterprise-wide policy and edit it and form it into their local policies, and then get those approved through the embassy and consulate, and then through Washington as well. And then I finished my job as the Deputy Regional Director for the Americas and Caribbean. So, providing guidance and oversight to all of the embassy security offices throughout the um, throughout the Americas and Caribbean. So, about 54 offices there. Um, Traveling to some of those to conduct inspections of them, uh, traveling to some of those to offer assistance with emergencies and crises. Um, I've got throughout the course of my career probably about 3 dozen emergencies and or crises that I've either been on the ground to help manage or have been helping manage with the 500-yard screwdriver from headquarters level.
Mm.
Um, and since I was able to retire in April of 2023, I decided to go ahead and try to bring this experience to the private sector. And through that, I formed Crisis Lead LLC, helping you manage risk, or helping you navigate risk and prepare for what's next. And working with that. And then I also um, met Dr. Gav Schneider from Risk to Solution in Australia, and he and I have struck up a friendship and a business relationship. So I'm working as a senior consultant and trainer for Risk to Solution as well. So,
And we're going to be talking about resilience, which is related to that in our second segment.
indeed, looking forward to that as well.
Well, welcome to the show, Chris. Let's jump straight into our first topic, which is bridging silos. And based on your experience, I'm sure you've seen silos everywhere. So, what's wrong with silos?
So, I think there's a lot of people that actually misunderstand silos. And
Mm,
it's not necessarily that silos are bad. In fact, I would argue that silos are necessary to the efficient functioning of an organization, right? You want to have the ability for, for instance, finance, sales, um, operations, things like that, and have specialists within those that can really run those sections efficiently. The problem becomes when those silo walls become so thick that they're not communicating effectively and efficiently with the rest of the enterprise.
mm,
So, one of the things that I always tried to do in my various roles in the Department of State was find ways to bridge those silos to better understand what they were up to, what their goals are, what their um, you know opportunities are, what their risks are. And also, it was very important, and I learned this even as a very young first tour assistant regional security officer, very important to have those conversations between the silos because my role was to develop security policy for the entire embassy.
mhm,
Okay. And let's talk about for a second access control, right? If I'm going to make a change to the access control policy, but I don't understand how one of the sections of the enterprise works, then that change could have a detrimental effect on how they engage in their operations. And this happens all over the place, in the government sector, in the private sector. And it's really important then to be able to have those conversations, bridge those silos so you can really understand, especially from a security perspective, because at the end of the day, the security section is a service sector for the rest of the business. And some people may disagree with that. I've had numerous people that I've worked with that, I'm not here to serve them, I'm here to protect them. No, you're really here for
mm,
both, you know. And when it comes to things like um, enterprise risk management, business continuity, emergency management, all three of those, interestingly, in many companies have a tendency to be siloed themselves.
mhm. Yeah.
But I wrote an article about this in uh, Security Journal Americas a couple of weeks ago, and the title of that was "Bridging Silos." And the point of the article was to help people understand that really, when you look at emergency management, business continuity, enterprise risk management, and there's other things along these lines as well, but the security office, the security function plays a major role in all three of those, even if the security function isn't in charge of one or any of them. But you need to be able to help those sections that own those understand what security's role is and what security can offer to, again, make that process more effective and more efficient.
So how do you
So,
go about doing that though? Because so many managers and leaders, they want to build their empires. They want
right,
their silo and they want to show that, hey, I'm in charge so that they can move forward in their careers as well. So how do you
right.
go about knocking on the door of, finance or something saying, hey, I need to understand what you do without them feeling as though someone's someone's trying to find out what we do or someone wants to take over or something like that. How do you go about doing that?
So, and it's funny you mentioned because you talk about people wanting to move up and things like that. And so, and this is a theory that I've been playing around with in my head a little bit recently, which is the silos are not cylindrical shaped, they're pyramid shaped.
Mm, yeah.
And like any corporate or government bureaucracy, right? It's important to understand the pyramids and how they're formed and how they connect inside of each other and with the other pyramids in the organization. And even quite frankly, when you're talking business continuity, how they connect with pyramids outside of the organization.
Hmm.
So, um, when you look at that, you got to understand that most likely those silos, those pyramids are connected at the top level, at the C-suite, right? But you still want to be able to find where are the appropriate levels as you work your way down to have those conversations and those injects. And I would argue, quite frankly, it takes number one, a lot of emotional intelligence to be able to come through not as a threat, but as somebody who is actually truly interested in what that section does and help them understand how you can help them accomplish their mission. Not just,
Hmm.
you know, I'm here from security and I'm here to lock things down and, we're the ambassadors of no and, um, risk is, not to be tolerated, which is kind of a funny story because, risk is really just the uncertainty on objectives, right? Is the ISO definition of risk. And to sit there and say that uncertainty won't be tolerated, you can't do that.
Yeah.
So that's, probably another conversation for the second half of this. Um, for myself, I think part of it has always been a natural curiosity in how things work, and that natural curiosity can come through again through some emotional intelligence as you're engaging with people. Sometimes, you know, I would even argue quite often, it may not be me that needs to bridge the silos. It may be somebody else on my team, somebody else at the same level as me or at a lower level who can go in a less, threatening way. And
Right.
instead of engaging as a, you know, peer to peer at kind of a senior level, grow those relationships down at some of the mid levels and the bottom levels. Um, Also, find ways to do it outside of the normal structure. So,
You mean?
one of the things I did is, especially in a couple of my overseas posts, in fact, basically all of my overseas posts after Guatemala, um, I got in the habit of I never had lunch in my office because you're working hard all day. And yeah, you might want to be seen as, really putting the pedal to the metal and working hard and powering through lunch at your desk and, looking good for the boss and stuff like that. What I found is this. I typically went to lunch either in the embassy cafeteria or out to lunch with different people. And the other part of it was I hardly ever had lunch with people from my own office because part of it was, we split the lunch period anyway. So there was always somebody in the office. But that social interaction where you can sit and have a meal with people, break bread with people, where you could, have a kind of wide ranging conversation, find out what's going on, what's shifting and changing in, their sections, their work lives was a really natural way to build some silos.
Mm.
And I had other people on my team that would do this as well. And we found out all kinds of, it wasn't elicitation, it wasn't spying. It was a natural curiosity as to what's going on, but we found all kinds of incredibly valuable information that allowed us to then position ourselves to help those offices accomplish their goals. Hey, there's a major procurement coming up, or there's a major event where we're going to have 30 people coming in, you know, to our spaces. There's a major trip coming up. Other things like that, yeah, you're going to hear about it eventually, right? Because eventually they'll put in, the day before the event, they'll put in the access request for 30 people, right? But quite frankly, if you have that information ahead of time and you can socialize it throughout your team, then you can be prepared so that when that access request comes in, or even go ahead to them to the other parts of that office ahead of time and say, hey, we've heard that this is coming up. What are you going to need from us? What
Yeah.
are your expectations? How can we support you?
So is it kind of like finding neutral ground? to to
Part of it.
to have those conversations rather than walking into someone's office saying, "Here's what I need from you," or you and your team, sitting around a table and one person comes in, like, "Oh my God, what are they going to want from me?" Finding neutral ground so that everyone is, you know, more relaxed to 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 want to talk to you.
So part of it is neutral ground, right? I think that helps a lot when you're engaging to bridge the silos in this way. But there are formal structures as well that accomplish that, such as, the dreaded C word, committees or working groups, right? Run properly, those, when they actually have a, defined mission, a defined set of people who are going to participate, um, an agenda for them and things like that, those can also be very effective ways to get people to cross collaborate and cross communicate. Again, you've got to have the right personalities that are involved in those.
Mm.
So these are actually a couple of things that I talk about. I have a book that's currently with a publisher, should be published by the end of the year. Um, it's called Scaling Pyramids, and it's leadership lessons from a mid-level bureaucrat. And it is all about, um, you know, especially when you're talking about leading organizations from a mid and lower level, it's all about growing these networks and the communications. And part of that also becomes building credibility, building reliability. So you need to be able to do those things as well in order to effectively have and maintain these relationships so that you can um, go forward and really bridge these silos. And the other interesting part about my career with diplomatic security is we rotated every 1 to 3 years. So every 1 to 3 years, you are in a new office, often a new country, a new culture. And that's not just the national culture that you're dealing with, but it is the culture of the organization that you're dealing with, and then that subculture of that operating location that you're dealing with. So these were skills that you needed to be able to pick up pretty quickly. And, I walked into, fortunately, some offices that had a very good, positive, collaborative culture. And I walked into some other offices that it was not as good.
Mm.
And, we had to find ways to rebuild that. And that, itself takes time. And when you're on a 2 year clock, to try and get stuff done, that can be definitely hard.
Well, that brings up an interesting point because many of our crisis communications or business continuity teams are a team of one or two. And
Yeah,
sometimes they've been around for a long time in an organization and are still struggling to get their point across, and they can't break down silos or climb the pyramids or however you want to term it. How can they go about getting started to make a change when they've been stuck in the same wheel, for
yeah.
years? What can they do right away to start making a change and break down those silos that they've been struggling against for years?
Yeah, and so it's great that you mentioned. So one of the things that I talk about in my book um, is sometimes you can't manage up, so you need to manage sideways first and then up.
Hmm.
So where can you find an ally in another section that can help you communicate what you're trying to do up that chain, up that pyramid? Where can you find the ability to say, all right, here is my injection point where I can actually have a conversation with someone who is somewhat like-minded, who understands what I'm trying to accomplish, and get them to then help me move that message up their chain and or help move that message across laterally to other parts of the pyramid or other silos so that we can again continue to build that up. And again, it is a very, as you point out, can be a very long and difficult process.
Hmm.
especially for somebody who is, you know, a solo practitioner in their particular realm. Um, and I've seen it also um, not work overly well when somebody comes in and says, "Well, per the instructions of the top, per the, you know, um, policies, the corporate policies, or per our compliance environment, whatever else like that. My role here is this, and I am in charge of this, and you will do what I say for this."
That
And
never goes over well.
it doesn't go over well. And I had that experience in one of my overseas assignments. It was actually in the local government of that particular country. And the person in charge of emergency management would wave around his little pamphlet of the law and say, this law says I'm in charge. And, many of the response services said, yeah, yeah, you're in charge, whatever. And but never truly engaged and built the resilience that they needed in the country.
Chris, we only have 3 minutes left in this segment. Do you
Wow.
have any final thoughts you'd like to share on bridging silos?
Again, I think the biggest part of it becomes finding those inflection points and understanding that they may not be at your level, they may not be at the top level, they may be lower on the pyramid. And if either you or someone else can find people and find the pain points and the um, inflection points and injection points to make those connections. And again, use some of your emotional intelligence to figure out and actively listen and find out what's going on with them and how you can then shape what you're doing that will help them. You will be much more successful.
Great. Well, on that note, we've come to the end of our first segment. We're talking with Christopher Stitt today. Chris, great first segment about bridging silos. In our second segment, we're going to be talking about resilience. Stay tuned, and we will be right back.